My name is Karen Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. I never thought my own family would try to murder me, but that's exactly what happened at our reunion dinner last night. When I saw my mother carefully placing that champagne glass in front of me, something in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Years of suspicion crystallized in that moment. So I did what they least expected. I swapped the glass when no one was looking. Now my sister is in the hospital, my parents are in custody, and our family's empire is crumbling before my eyes. If you're watching this from the comfort of a normal family, count yourself lucky. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you might just save your life someday. I grew up in Wellesley, an affluent suburb of Boston, in a sprawling colonial mansion that my father, Robert Mitchell, had built as a testament to our family's success. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, wealthy, influential, and respected. My father had built Mitchell Properties from the ground up, transforming it into a luxury real estate development company worth millions. Our family name was on office buildings, shopping centers, and exclusive residential communities throughout New England. My mother, Diane, was the quintessential socialite, immaculately dressed, impeccably mannered, and utterly cold. She orchestrated our public appearances with precision, ensuring that the Mitchell family maintained its sterling reputation in Boston's high society. Behind closed doors, however, she was calculating and status-obsessed, measuring her worth by the envy of others. I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older sister Sylvia and younger brother Wayne. Sylvia, now 37, was always the favored child. She mirrored our parents perfectly, ambitious, poised, and utterly ruthless when necessary. She stayed in the family business, rising to become chief operating officer and never missing an opportunity to remind me of my abandonment of family duty. Wayne, 30, was the troubled one. He had our father's charm, but none of his discipline. His life was a carousel of substance abuse problems, failed relationships, and business ventures that inevitably required family bailouts. Despite this, my parents protected him fiercely, covering up scandals and making excuses for his behavior that they would never have made for me. The only person who ever truly understood me was my cousin Gloria. She was 36, just 2 years older than me, and worked as the company's financial controller. She had a sharp mind for numbers and an even sharper instinct for detecting lies. She was my ally in family gatherings, my confidant and my lifeline in the suffocating atmosphere of Mitchell family politics. 8 years ago, I made the decision that changed everything. After earning my MBA from Harvard Business School, I was expected to join Mitchell Properties as everyone in our family had done for 2 generations. Instead, I founded Pinnacle Marketing, my own firm specializing in digital marketing strategies for sustainable businesses. It was a deliberate move away from the luxury real estate world my family dominated. My parents' reaction was swift and severe. My father called it a betrayal of everything he had built. My mother worried more about what people would say. Sylvia accused me of thinking I was too good for the family business. Only Gloria supported me, secretly helping me secure my first clients. For years, our relationship was reduced to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional stiff dinner when business brought me back to Boston. I built my company into a nationally recognized agency with offices in Chicago and Seattle. My success only seemed to deepen the rift. Then 6 months ago, Gloria died. The official report called it an accidental drowning at her lakeside cabin in New Hampshire. She was an excellent swimmer, which immediately struck me as suspicious, but my concerns were dismissed by the family. They buried her quickly, and life moved on with disturbing speed. 3 months later, my Uncle Stanley passed away at 85. He was my father's older brother and the former chairman of Mitchell Properties, who had semi-retired a decade earlier, but remained on the board. His death wasn't unexpected given his age, but the timing felt significant. What I didn't know then was that Uncle Stanley had changed his will shortly before his death. The reading was scheduled for the day after our family reunion, a fact that would soon prove critically important. In the weeks following Gloria's death, I began my own investigation. Something didn't add up. Gloria had called me 3 times in the week before she died, leaving cryptic messages about needing to discuss family matters urgently. We had scheduled a meeting in New York neutral territory, away from the family, but she died 2 days before it could happen. I hired a private investigator who discovered something alarming. Mitchell Properties was in serious financial trouble. Their last 3 major developments had gone significantly over budget, and investors were getting nervous. There were also irregularities in the accounting that suggested money was being siphoned out of the company. Gloria, as financial controller, would have been aware of these issues. It was at this point that I received the surprise invitation from my mother. After years of minimal contact, she suddenly wanted the entire family together at the estate for a weekend reunion before Uncle Stanley's will reading. Families should face these moments together, she wrote in her elegant script on personalized stationery. It's time to put the past behind us. Every instinct told me not to go, but I needed to know what had happened to Gloria, and I needed to know why, after years of cold shoulders, my family suddenly wanted me home. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, a cream-colored envelope with the Mitchell family crest embossed in gold on the back flap. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, even after all these years. The formal flowing script that I had seen on countless birthday cards and notes in my lunchbox as a child. A family reunion at Mitchell Estate, the invitation read, to gather before the reading of Stanley Mitchell's last will and testament. Friday through Sunday, all family members expected to attend. Expected, not invited. That was my mother's way. I called my best friend Peggy that night, phone in one hand and a glass of Cabernet in the other. They actually expect me to come back after 8 years of radio silence. I paced around my Chicago apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my floor-to-ceiling windows. The last time I saw my father, he told me I was dead to him for not joining the family business. Don't go, Peggy said immediately. Nothing good ever comes from reopening old wounds with your family. You've built a beautiful life without them. But Gloria, I said softly. Something happened to her, Peg. She knew something, and now she's gone. If I don't figure out what it was, then what? You'll end up like her, Peggy's voice rose with concern. Karen, this isn't a mystery novel. You're not a detective. If you're worried about foul play, call the police. With what evidence? A hunch. Some cryptic voicemails. I sighed. Besides, the Mitchells have half the Boston PD in their pocket. Dad's been funding their benevolent association for decades. There was silence on the line for a moment. If you're determined to go, then go in with your eyes open, Peggy finally said. And call me every day, or I'm sending in the National Guard. The drive from Boston Logan Airport to Wellesley took longer than I remembered. Perhaps it was the weight of anxiety pressing down on my chest, making each mile feel like 10. When the car finally turned onto the private road leading to Mitchell Estate, my stomach clenched. The house looked exactly the same, a massive colonial with white columns flanking the entrance, manicured gardens extending in every direction, and the distinctive copper weather vane in the shape of an M that my grandfather had commissioned when he first built the place. It was like stepping back in time, as though the last 8 years had never happened. The driver helped me with my bags, and I found myself standing at the front door, hesitant to ring the bell of my childhood home. Before I could decide, the door swung open. "You're late," my mother said by way of greeting. Diane Mitchell hadn't aged a day. Her ash-blonde hair was still perfectly coiffed, not a strand out of place. Her face was smooth, too smooth, suggesting recent work, and her posture remained ramrod straight. She wore a cashmere sweater set and pearls, as though she were about to host a garden club meeting rather than reunite with her estranged daughter. "Hello, Mother," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Traffic from the airport." The foyer was imposing as ever, with its black and white marble floor and grand staircase curving up to the second floor. Family portraits lined the walls, chronicling the Mitchell dynasty through the generations. I noticed with a pang that there were no recent photos of me. "Your father and siblings are in the drawing room," my mother said, leading the way. "We've been waiting to start cocktail hour." The drawing room was a time capsule. The same oriental rugs, the same antique furniture, the same portrait of my great-grandfather above the fireplace. My father stood by the bar cart fixing a drink. At 65, Robert Mitchell remained an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered with a full head of silver hair and the confident posture of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Sylvia sat perched on the edge of an armchair, legs crossed at the ankle, looking like she'd stepped out of a Brooks Brothers catalog. Wayne lounged on the sofa, phone in hand, only glancing up briefly when I entered. "Karen," my father said, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone I remembered from childhood. "You made it. Drink?" "Scotch neat," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Still drinking like a man," Sylvia commented with a tight smile. "Some things never change." "And some people never grow up," I replied, matching her smile watt for watt. "How's the family business still riding on Dad's coattails?" "Children," my mother interjected sharply. "Let's not start the weekend with hostilities." Wayne snorted but didn't look up from his phone. "Wayne," my father snapped, "put that damn thing away and say hello to your sister." Wayne finally looked up, his handsome face showing the telltale puffiness of someone who drank too much and slept too little. "Hey sis, how's the granola marketing business? Still saving the world, one hemp tote bag at a time." "Sustainable business is a $12 billion industry now," I replied smoothly, accepting the scotch from my father. "But you wouldn't know about profitable ventures, would you?" Dinner that night was a masterclass in passive-aggressive family dynamics. My mother had instructed the cook to prepare all my childhood favorites, a detail that might have seemed thoughtful if I didn't know better. It was her way of reminding me of all I had left behind, of the comfort and privilege I had rejected. "Karen's company was featured in Forbes last month," my father announced unexpectedly during the main course. "A profile on women entrepreneurs changing the marketing landscape." 4 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise, including my own. "You saw that?" I asked, unable to hide my shock. "I keep tabs on all significant market developments," he replied, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "Your work with that electric car company was particularly noteworthy. Innovative approach." Before I could respond to this unexpected compliment, Sylvia jumped in. "Speaking of the company, Dad, we should discuss the Riverside project before the board meeting next week. The contractors are pushing back on the timeline again." "Not at dinner, Sylvia," my mother said firmly. "Business can wait until tomorrow." An odd look passed between my sister and brother, so quick I nearly missed it. "Of course," Sylvia conceded. "We just need to make sure everything happens on schedule tomorrow." Later that night, unable to sleep in my old bedroom, I decided to do some exploring. The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I moved silently down the stairs, avoiding the 3rd step that had always creaked. My father's study was unlocked, unusual for a man obsessed with privacy. The massive mahogany desk dominated the room, and the walls were lined with books and awards. I went straight for the filing cabinet behind the desk, the one place my father had always forbidden us to touch as children. It was locked, but I knew where he kept the key, taped to the underside of the center desk drawer, a hiding place he thought was clever. Some things never changed. The files inside were organized with my father's characteristic precision. I quickly found what I was looking for: recent financial statements for Mitchell Properties. Scanning the documents confirmed what my investigator had discovered and more. The company wasn't just in trouble, it was on the verge of collapse. Debt had piled up, projects were stalled, and there appeared to be a significant shortfall in the accounts. As I was replacing the files, I noticed a folder labeled SM Estate. Inside were notes about Uncle Stanley's will and estate. One document caught my eye, a memo from the family lawyer indicating that Stanley had made significant changes to his will just weeks before his death. I returned to my room with more questions than answers. As I was about to turn on the bedside lamp, my hand brushed against something in the drawer. Pulling it out, I discovered a small notebook I didn't recognize. Opening it revealed Gloria's distinctive handwriting filled with columns of numbers and coded notes. One entry stood out. K must know. SM changed everything. They can't be trusted. My cousin had hidden a message for me right here in the guest room she knew I would be assigned if I ever returned. Gloria had known something was going to happen. She had tried to warn me. Sleep eluded me that night as I pieced together what I knew. My family's company was failing financially. Uncle Stanley had changed his will shortly before his death. Gloria had discovered something troubling and died before she could tell me. And now suddenly my estranged family wanted me home. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. I woke to the sound of hushed voices outside my window. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 5:43 a.m., much too early for any normal family activity. Carefully moving to the window, I peered through a crack in the curtains. In the pale dawn light, I could make out two figures walking across the back garden toward the old greenhouse. Sylvia and Wayne deep in conversation. Sylvia was gesturing emphatically while Wayne kept shaking his head. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke of urgency and disagreement. They disappeared into the greenhouse, emerging 15 minutes later, carrying what looked like a small lockbox between them. They quickly made their way back to the house, glancing around furtively. By the time I joined the family for breakfast at 8, there was no sign of their early morning activities. My mother presided over the table like a general, directing the housekeeper to refill coffee cups and ensure the food remained at perfect temperature. "I've made your favorite blueberry pancakes, Karen," she announced as I took my seat. "You always loved them as a girl." "That's thoughtful, Mother," I replied, noting how she watched me intently as the plate was placed before me. Though I usually just have coffee for breakfast these days. "Not since," she insisted, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You need proper nourishment. Eat up." I cut into the pancakes and made a show of taking a bite, but when attention shifted to Wayne's late entrance, I quietly slipped most of my portion onto a spare napkin in my lap. Something didn't feel right. "The will reading is scheduled for 3 o'clock tomorrow," my father announced. "Dennis will be coming by this afternoon to discuss some preliminaries." Dennis Green had been the Mitchell family lawyer for as long as I could remember, a nervous man with thinning hair who seemed perpetually intimidated by my father. "I thought Gloria was handling all of Uncle Stanley's estate matters," I said casually, watching their reactions. A momentary silence fell over the table. "Gloria was handling the preliminary work," my father finally replied. "But obviously arrangements had to be made after her unfortunate accident." "Such a tragedy," my mother added, dabbing at her lips with a napkin. "She was like a daughter to me." Sylvia cleared her throat. "Karen Mother has planned a special family dinner tonight, in honor of us all being together again. And to toast to Uncle Stanley's memory," Wayne added quickly. "How nice," I replied, noting how Sylvia's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee cup. "I look forward to it." After breakfast, I decided to explore the grounds ostensibly for nostalgia's sake, but really to investigate the greenhouse. As I crossed the lawn, I spotted Eugene, the elderly groundskeeper who had worked for my family since before I was born. "Miss Karen," he called, tipping his worn cap. "Good to see you back home." "Hello, Eugene," I said warmly. "How have you been?" "Can't complain," he replied, leaning on his rake. "Though things haven't been the same since Miss Gloria passed. She used to come by regular-like, checking on the property." This caught my attention. "Gloria came here often." Eugene nodded, his weathered face solemn. 2-3 times a week these past few months. Always with paperwork, always looking worried. Last time I saw her, she was arguing fierce with Miss Sylvia by the greenhouse. Day before she died, that was. My heart raced. "Do you know what they were arguing about?" Eugene glanced toward the house before answering. "Couldn't hear much, but Miss Gloria kept saying something about illegal and have to report it. Miss Sylvia didn't take kindly to that talk. I thanked Eugene and continued toward the greenhouse, my mind processing this new information. Inside, the air was humid and heavy with the scent of soil and growing things. The structure was divided into sections: tropical plants, herbs, and vegetables for the kitchen. Nothing seemed out of place. I methodically searched each section until I reached the back wall where gardening tools hung on hooks. Behind a large bag of potting soil, I noticed a loose brick in the wall. Removing it revealed a small cavity containing a plastic bag. Inside was a partially burned letter, the paper singed around the edges as if someone had tried to destroy it but changed their mind. The letterhead showed it was from Uncle Stanley, addressed to Gloria, dated just weeks before her death. Much of it was unreadable, but one paragraph stood out clearly: "Must protect Karen from what's happening. If my suspicions are correct, they won't stop at anything to maintain control. I've made arrangements with Dennis. The changes to my will should ensure that the truth comes out, but we must be careful until then. Trust no one in the family except—" The rest was burned away. I carefully folded the letter and tucked it into my pocket, replacing the brick exactly as I'd found it. My hand was steady, but my mind was racing. Uncle Stanley had changed his will to protect me. Gloria had discovered something illegal. And now both of them were dead. Back in my room, I set up the tiny wireless cameras I had brought with me, placing them strategically. One overlooking my bed, one facing the door, and one on my dressing table with a view of the entire room. I paired them with the app on my phone, ensuring I could monitor any activity when I wasn't present. Before heading downstairs, I examined the breakfast pancakes I had saved in the napkin. Breaking off a small piece, I used a testing kit I had brought with me, the kind used to detect certain drugs in drinks at bars. The paper strip turned blue almost immediately. Sleeping pills. They had drugged my breakfast. Just then my phone buzzed with a message from Dorothy, the private investigator friend I had contacted after finding Gloria's notebook. "Pulled strings with medical examiner contact," her text read. Preliminary talk screen on Gloria showed traces of digitalis. Not consistent with drowning. Report was flagged but never followed up. Also found that Stanley hired PI month before death, looking into family finances. My suspicions were confirming themselves piece by piece. I texted back, "Coming to dinner tonight. Think they might try something. Have evidence ready. If you don't hear from me by midnight, call Boston PD Captain Reynolds directly." Dorothy's response was immediate. "Are you sure you should stay? Get out now." "Need concrete proof," I replied, setting a trap. As I headed downstairs to meet Dennis, I recalled a childhood incident I had nearly forgotten. A family vacation at Lake Winnipesaukee when I was 12. I had nearly drowned while swimming near the dock. The official story was that I had gotten a cramp, but what I remembered most vividly was seeing Sylvia watching from the shore, making no move to help or call for assistance. It was a passing boater who had pulled me out. At the time, I had convinced myself I was misremembering that Sylvia couldn't have just watched. Now I wasn't so sure. Dennis Green arrived precisely at 1 o'clock, his perpetual nervousness even more pronounced than usual. He jumped when I entered the study where he was meeting with my father. "Karen," he said, adjusting his glasses. "How wonderful to see you after all this time." "Hello, Dennis," I replied, noting how he couldn't quite meet my eye. "I understand you have some preliminary matters to discuss before tomorrow's will reading." My father cleared his throat. Dennis was just explaining that there might be some unusual provisions in Stanley's will. "We're trying to prepare for all possibilities." "Unusual how?" I asked, looking directly at Dennis. The lawyer shuffled his papers. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics until the formal reading, of course. But your uncle made some significant changes shortly before his passing. He was concerned about certain matters." "What matters?" My father pressed, his tone hardening. "As I said, Robert, I cannot disclose that information until tomorrow," Dennis replied, his voice quavering slightly. "Stanley was very specific about the conditions." But you can confirm that the will has been properly executed and is legally binding? I asked. Dennis looked momentarily startled by my question. Yes, absolutely. All legal requirements have been met. The witnesses were independent, and Stanley was of sound mind when he made the changes. My father scowled but said nothing. After Dennis left, I noticed Wayne searching my room on my phone's camera app. He rifled through my suitcase, checked under the mattress, and even looked inside the air vent. He seemed frustrated not to find whatever he was looking for. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to work on my laptop while actually documenting everything I had discovered. I encrypted the files and sent copies to both Peggy and Dorothy with instructions to release them to authorities if anything happened to me. As evening approached, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. My mother was unusually involved in the dinner preparations, giving specific instructions to the cook and selecting the table settings herself. "Tonight is special," she kept saying. "Everything must be perfect for our family reunion." I texted Dorothy one final message. "Dinner in 30 minutes. Cameras active. Evidence documented and sent to you. If anything happens, you know what to do." Her reply was simple. "Be careful. Police on standby." I looked at myself in the mirror, straightened my shoulders, and headed downstairs to dinner, prepared for whatever my family had planned. The dining room glowed with soft light from the crystal chandelier that had hung there since my great-grandfather's time. The antique mahogany table gleamed, set with the Wedgwood china reserved for special occasions and sterling silver flatware that bore the Mitchell family crest. Fresh flowers from the garden formed an elaborate centerpiece, and candles flickered in silver holders at regular intervals down the table's length. It was beautiful, meticulous, and utterly false, like everything else about my family. My mother had instructed the cook to prepare all my childhood favorites: roast duck with cherry sauce, scalloped potatoes with Gruyere cheese, haricots verts, with toasted almonds, and Parker House rolls. For dessert, I could smell my favorite lemon soufflé baking in the kitchen. It was a meal designed to evoke nostalgia, to lower my defenses through the power of comfort and memory. "Karen, you look lovely tonight," my mother remarked as I entered the dining room. "That shade of blue always suited you." I was wearing a navy cocktail dress I had deliberately chosen for its high neckline and long sleeves, minimizing any skin exposure that might come in contact with something they had prepared. "Thank you, Mother," I replied, noting how her eyes flickered with something that might have been disappointment. Had she expected me to wear something else? Perhaps the cream-colored dress she had conspicuously laid out on my bed earlier. My father stood at the head of the table adjusting his cufflinks, gold with small diamonds, a gift from my mother on their 30th anniversary. Wayne lounged in his chair, already nursing what appeared to be his second or third whiskey. Sylvia was absent. "Where's Sylvia?" I asked casually. "Helping your mother bring in the special champagne," my father replied. "We've been saving a particular vintage for an occasion when the family was together again." As if on cue, my mother and sister appeared, my mother carrying a silver tray with 5 crystal champagne flutes, while Sylvia followed with an ice bucket containing a bottle of Dom Pérignon. 1996, my mother announced proudly. A spectacular year. I watched carefully as she placed the tray on the sideboard. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she arranged the glasses in a specific order. I noticed how she subtly touched the rim of one glass, third from the left, with her finger as if marking it. "Shall we begin with a toast?" my father suggested, "before the food is served?" "Wonderful idea," my mother agreed. She lifted the tray and began distributing the glasses. She handed the first to my father, the second to Wayne, then paused before the remaining 3. After a moment's hesitation that only I seemed to notice, she handed one to Sylvia. Then she approached me, tray extended with the 2 remaining glasses. "Karen, dear, take whichever you prefer." Her eyes fixed on the glass on the left, the one she had touched earlier. Her intent was clear. "Actually, Mother," I said with a smile, "would you mind if I help bring in the first course? I noticed Julia was struggling a bit with the duck." My mother blinked momentarily, thrown off script. That's very thoughtful, Karen, but we have staff for that. I insist, I said, already moving toward the kitchen. Sylvia can help too, can't you, Sil? For old time's sake. Before either could object, I had taken Sylvia by the elbow and guided her toward the kitchen, leaving my mother holding the tray with the 2 remaining glasses. In the kitchen, the cook was indeed struggling with the heavy roast duck. While helping her transfer it to a serving platter, I maneuvered Sylvia and myself back toward the dining room door, positioning us to return at just the right moment. We re-entered the dining room to find my mother had set down the champagne tray and was speaking quietly but intensely to my father. They fell silent when they saw us. All set, I announced cheerfully. Julia will bring the duck in momentarily. My mother recovered quickly. Wonderful. Now let's have our toast before the champagne loses its fizz. She picked up the tray again and extended it toward me. This time I took the glass on the right without hesitation. She frowned slightly but handed the remaining glass, the marked one, to Sylvia. To family, my father proclaimed, raising his glass. And to new beginnings. To family, we all echoed. I raised the glass to my lips, but didn't drink, merely pretending to take a sip. My eyes never left Sylvia as she took a generous swallow of the champagne. For a moment, nothing happened. Conversation resumed as Julia entered with the duck and began serving. My father carved the bird with his usual precision, while my mother directed the placement of side dishes. 10 minutes into the meal, I noticed Sylvia blinking rapidly, her hand going to her throat. Is something wrong with the duck, Sylvia? My mother asked, noticing her daughter had stopped eating. You've barely touched it. I'm fine, Sylvia replied, but her voice sounded strained. Just feeling a little warm. She took another sip of water, then suddenly dropped the glass, sending it shattering across the table. Her eyes widened in alarm as her breathing became labored. Sylvia, my father said sharply. What's wrong? Sylvia tried to stand but staggered, knocking over her chair. I can't breathe properly, she gasped. Something's wrong. My mother rushed to her side, genuine panic now etched on her face. Sylvia, what is it? What's happening? Wayne had gone pale, his eyes darting between Sylvia and me. That wasn't supposed to happen to her, he blurted out, then immediately looked horrified at his own words. My father's head snapped up, his gaze locking with mine. In that moment, I saw the realization dawn in his eyes. I had known. Somehow I had known and turned their plan against them. We need to call an ambulance, I said calmly, pulling out my phone. No, my father barked. No ambulance. She's just having an allergic reaction. Wayne, get the EpiPen from the medicine cabinet. This isn't an allergic reaction, I replied, already dialing. And we all know it. She's been poisoned with whatever you put in my glass, Mother. My mother's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. 911, what's your emergency? Came the voice from my phone. I need an ambulance at 78 Woodland Drive in Wellesley, I said clearly. My sister has been poisoned, and please send police as well. There's been an attempted murder. Don't be ridiculous, my father shouted, lunging for my phone. Hang up that phone immediately. I stepped back, keeping the line open. They've been planning this for weeks. I continued, speaking to both the emergency operator and my family. They drugged my food this morning. The champagne was meant for me. Sylvia had collapsed onto the floor now, her breathing shallow and rapid. Wayne stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. My mother knelt beside Sylvia, genuine tears streaming down her face. Stay on the line, ma'am, the operator said. Emergency services are on their way. ETA 5 minutes. This is insane, my father said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You've lost your mind, Karen. Sylvia is having a medical episode. There's no need for police. You know what I think is insane, I replied, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. That my own family would try to murder me for money. That's what this is about, isn't it, Uncle Stanley's will? He left everything to me, didn't he? My father's silence was confirmation enough. What did you do to Gloria? I pressed. She figured it out too, didn't she? The embezzlement, the company's financial problems, all of it. So you got rid of her before she could expose you. You don't understand anything, my mother hissed, looking up from Sylvia's prone form. We built this family, this legacy. Everything we did was to protect what's ours. In the distance, sirens wailed. By the way, I added, pulling a small device from my pocket, I've been recording this entire conversation, and I set up cameras throughout the house when I arrived. Every incriminating word and action has been documented. The color drained from my father's face. For the first time in my life, I saw him afraid. The next few minutes passed in a blur. Paramedics burst into the dining room, immediately attending to Sylvia. Police officers followed, taking in the scene with professional detachment. That woman, my mother shrieked, pointing at me as an officer approached her. She poisoned my daughter, arrest her. The lead officer, a stern-faced woman with captain's bars, turned to me. Are you Karen Mitchell? Yes, I replied. Captain Reynolds. She introduced herself. We received some very interesting files from a Dorothy Williams about an hour ago with instructions to review them immediately and be on standby for a call from this address. My father lunged toward me but was quickly restrained by two officers. You planned this, he snarled. You set us up. No, Dad, I replied calmly. You set yourselves up the moment you decided that money was more important than your daughter's life. As the paramedics wheeled Sylvia out on a stretcher, one of them reported, Initial assessment suggests digitalis poisoning, same compound found in the victim from the lake drowning case 3 months ago. Captain Reynolds nodded grimly. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell Wayne. Mitchell, you're all being detained for questioning in connection with the attempted murder of Karen Mitchell and the suspicious death of Gloria Mitchell. You have the right to remain silent. I watched as my family was led away in handcuffs, their faces masks of shock and rage. The grand Mitchell dining room, with its expensive china and family heirlooms, now stood as a crime scene yellow tape marking off the area where Sylvia had collapsed. In one evening, everything had changed. The truth had finally emerged, breaking through decades of lies and manipulation. As I followed the police outside to give my statement, I felt no joy in my family's downfall, only a profound sense of vindication and relief that their deadly plan had failed. The will reading would still happen tomorrow, but now it would take place under very different circumstances. And I had a feeling that Uncle Stanley, wherever he was, would approve of how things had turned out. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and despair. I sat on an uncomfortable plastic chair outside the intensive care unit where Sylvia had been admitted. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to leave until I knew she would survive. She was still my sister, even if she had been complicit in a plot to kill me. Ms. Mitchell. A doctor in blue scrubs approached, clipboard in hand. I'm Dr. Sharma, overseeing your sister's care. I stood up. How is she? Stable for now, he replied. We've administered digoxin-specific antibody fragments to counteract the poisoning. It was fortunate she received treatment so quickly. Another 30 minutes could have been fatal. The irony wasn't lost on me. If my family had succeeded in their plan, I would have been the one fighting for life, or already lost it. Can you confirm what was used to poison her? I asked. Dr. Sharma consulted his clipboard. Preliminary toxicology indicates a significant dose of digitalis, a compound derived from foxglove plants. It's used medicinally in controlled doses for certain heart conditions, but in higher amounts. It's lethal, I finished for him, and difficult to detect if someone isn't specifically looking for it. He nodded, giving me a curious look. The police mentioned this wasn't an accident. No, I said quietly. It wasn't. After the doctor left, I checked my phone. It was 11:23 p.m. I had missed calls from Peggy Dorothy and several news outlets that had somehow already gotten wind of the story. The Boston Globe had published an online breaking news alert Prominent Boston family detained after alleged murder plot. As I scrolled through messages, a police officer approached, young with a sympathetic expression that suggested he was new enough to the job to still be affected by human drama. Ms. Mitchell, Detective Garcia asked me to inform you that they've executed a search warrant at your family's estate. They've already found evidence corroborating your account, including what appears to be digitalis extract in your mother's personal bathroom cabinet. Thank you, officer, I replied. He also said the will reading is still scheduled for tomorrow at 3 if you want to attend. The executor insisted it proceed regardless of current circumstances. I nodded. I'll be there. When I was finally alone again, the enormity of the night's events crashed over me. My family, the people who should have loved me most in the world, had tried to murder me. The realization brought no tears, only a hollow feeling in my chest. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. I had spent the night in a hotel, unable to return to the family estate that now felt more toxic than ever. At 9 a.m., my phone rang with a call from Captain Reynolds. Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to update you personally. Your sister is recovering and has been formally placed under arrest in the hospital. Your brother has confessed to everything. Wayne confessed. I couldn't hide my surprise. Broke down completely during questioning, Reynolds confirmed. He claims your parents masterminded the plan, but he was aware of it. He also confirmed suspicions about your cousin Gloria's death. Apparently, she discovered financial irregularities in the company accounts, including evidence that your father and sister had embezzled nearly $15 million from investors over the past 5 years. And Uncle Stanley. No evidence of foul play there, Reynolds replied. But according to your brother, your uncle had begun asking questions after Gloria approached him with concerns. That's when he changed his will. At precisely 3 o'clock, I walked into the conference room at Green & Associates law firm. Dennis sat at the head of the table, looking even more nervous than usual. 2 police officers stood discreetly by the door. My parents and Wayne were absent, still in custody, but Sylvia had been permitted to attend under police supervision, handcuffed to her hospital wheelchair. She refused to look at me. Several other relatives were present, distant cousins and in-laws who appeared bewildered by the dramatic turn of events. They whispered among themselves, falling silent when I entered. Now that we're all here, Dennis began adjusting his glasses, I'll proceed with the reading of Stanley Mitchell's last will and testament. He cleared his throat and began reading the formal legal preamble. When he reached the distribution of assets, the room grew completely still. To my niece, Karen Mitchell, and my niece, Gloria Mitchell, I leave all my personal assets, including cash investments, real estate, and personal effects, to be divided equally between them. In the event that either Karen or Gloria predeceases me, their share shall pass entirely to the surviving niece. Murmurs broke out around the table. Dennis continued. Furthermore, I bequeath my controlling shares in Mitchell Properties to Karen Mitchell, with the stipulation that she use this position to investigate and rectify any financial improprieties within the company. I have documented my concerns in a sealed letter to be delivered to Karen upon my death. Dennis looked up. With Gloria's passing, that means Karen inherits everything, approximately $68 million in personal assets and 51% of Mitchell Properties shares currently valued at approximately $120 million, though recent events may affect that valuation. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. From her wheelchair, Sylvia finally looked at me, her eyes burning with hatred. Dennis raised his hand for silence. There's more. Stanley left a sealed letter for Karen as mentioned in the will. I am instructed to provide it now. He handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a detailed account of Uncle Stanley's suspicions about the company finances, along with evidence he had gathered with Gloria's help. There were bank statements showing unusual transfers, correspondence about projects with inflated budgets, and a list of offshore accounts where money had been hidden. The final page was a personal note. Dear Karen, if you're reading this, I wasn't able to expose the truth before my time came. Gloria came to me with evidence that your father, with Sylvia's help, has been systematically looting the company for years. When investors began asking questions, they started using client funds to cover their tracks, creating a massive Ponzi scheme that will eventually collapse. Gloria feared for her safety after confronting them. By the time you receive this, I fear she may already have paid the price for her honesty. Protect yourself. Trust no one in the family. I've arranged for everything to come to you because you were the only one who had the courage to break free from the toxic legacy of wealth at any cost. Use what I've left you to make things right. The Mitchell name deserves better than to end in disgrace. With love and faith in you, Uncle Stanley. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope, aware of all eyes on me. There's one more thing, Dennis said, his voice steadier now. Stanley set up a trust for the employees of Mitchell Properties, ensuring they would be protected financially in the event of company troubles. He was prescient about potential difficulties. In the following days, the full extent of my family's crimes came to light. The company had been operating as a sophisticated fraud for years, using new investor money to pay returns to earlier investors, while my father and Sylvia siphoned millions into personal accounts. When Gloria discovered discrepancies in the books, she took her concerns to Uncle Stanley, who began his own investigation. When they realized Stanley had changed his will to leave everything to Gloria and me, they murdered Gloria, making it look like an accidental drowning. The digitalis found in her system matched exactly what had been used on Sylvia and intended for me. The family business partners and investors abandoned Mitchell Properties en masse as news of the scandal spread. The company's stock plummeted, and bankruptcy proceedings began almost immediately. The Mitchell name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige in Boston, now represented fraud and attempted murder. My mother finally requested to see me a week after her arrest. I found her in the visitors' room of the detention center, her designer clothes replaced by a drab jumpsuit, her perfectly coiffed hair now flat and dull. Without her usual makeup and in the harsh fluorescent light, she looked every one of her 62 years. "Why did you come?" she asked when I sat across from her. "Closure," I replied simply. She studied me for a long moment. "You know you were always the smartest of my children. I should have remembered that before underestimating you." "That's not an apology, Mother." "What would be the point?" she asked, her voice bitter. "We both know I'm not sorry for trying to protect what your father and I built. I'm only sorry we failed." "You didn't fail at protecting the family legacy," I said quietly. "You destroyed it yourself long before I swapped that champagne glass. The moment you decided that money was more important than your child's life, you lost everything that actually mattered." She flinched slightly, but quickly regained her composure. "So self-righteous. What will you do now?" "Donate everything to charity. Play the martyr. I'm going to do what Uncle Stanley wanted. Make things right. The employees who lost their jobs because of your fraud will be taken care of. The investors will get back what they can. And I'll rebuild the company with actual integrity." "They'll never let you," she said dismissively. "The Mitchell name is poison now." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But unlike you, Mother, I don't need the family name to know who I am." As I stood to leave, she called after me. "You're still a Mitchell Karen. No matter how far you run, that blood is in your veins. You're more like us than you want to admit." I turned back one last time. The difference is, I choose who I want to be, and I choose not to be like you. I walked out of the detention center into the bright sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. The road ahead would be challenging, rebuilding from the ashes of scandal, making amends to those my family had harmed, finding my own path forward. But for the first time, I was truly free of the toxic legacy that had shadowed my life for so long. My phone buzzed with a text from Peggy. "Saw the news. You okay?" "Getting there," I typed back. "Having dinner with Dorothy tonight to thank her. Want to join?" Her reply came immediately. "Absolutely. You're buying with your new millions, right?" I smiled. My real family, the one I had chosen, was waiting for me. And that was worth more than all the Mitchell millions combined. 6 months passed like a strange dream. Spring turned to summer, and the scandal of the Mitchell family faded from headlines, replaced by newer, more shocking stories. But for those of us living in the aftermath, the healing process had barely begun. The criminal cases against my family members proceeded at the glacial pace of the justice system. My father and mother both faced multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and attempted murder. They had hired separate high-powered defense teams, each now blaming the other for masterminding the crimes. Their joint assets had been frozen, forcing them to liquidate personal collections of art and jewelry just to pay legal fees. Sylvia, after recovering from the poisoning, accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against our parents. She received a 10-year sentence with possibility of parole after 7+ forfeiture of all assets gained through fraud. The last time I saw her in court, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Wayne received the lightest sentence, 5 years with eligibility for parole in 3, due to his immediate confession and cooperation with prosecutors. During his sentencing hearing, he broke down, completely apologizing directly to me from across the courtroom. I nodded in acknowledgement, but felt nothing, neither forgiveness nor hatred, just emptiness where family feelings should have been. As for me, I had relocated to a renovated industrial loft in Cambridge, unable to remain in either Chicago or Wellesley, with their complicated memories. The $68 million from Uncle Stanley's personal estate was held in escrow pending final resolution of all legal matters, though my ownership was not in dispute. The Mitchell Properties shares had plummeted in value, but still represented significant wealth if the company could be salvaged. I had spent countless hours with forensic accountants trying to untangle the web of financial deception my father and sister had created. It was worse than anyone had initially thought. Nearly $20 million embezzled over 8 years, with at least 50 investors defrauded of their life savings. The Ponzi scheme had been sophisticated enough to avoid detection by regular audits, using a complex network of shell companies and falsified documents. On a warm September afternoon, I sat across from Marcia Henderson, the lead attorney for the investor class action lawsuit against Mitchell Properties. We had been negotiating for weeks, trying to find a resolution that would provide some restitution to those who had lost everything. "The current offer is 70 cents on the dollar," Marcia said, reviewing her notes. "It's more than most fraud victims ever see, Karen. You don't have to do this." "It's not enough," I replied. "Uncle Stanley wanted me to make things right. These people trusted our family name. Even with the insurance payouts and liquidating all company assets, we can only reach about 85 cents on the dollar," Marcia argued. "The remaining 15% would have to come from your personal inheritance." "Then that's what we'll do," I said firmly. "Full restitution, plus 3% interest to account for time value. And I want a fund established for the former employees, providing 6 months' salary and benefits continuation." Marcia looked at me over her reading glasses. "That will consume almost 30 million of your inheritance. Are you absolutely certain?" "I am," I replied without hesitation. "Draft the papers." Later that week, I visited the Mitchell Properties headquarters for what would likely be the last time. The once bustling office was now a ghost town, with only a skeleton crew remaining to handle the wind-down operations. Family photos had been removed from the walls, leaving conspicuous clean rectangles on the faded wallpaper. In my father's former office, now mine by default, I sat behind the massive desk where he had once ruled his small empire. Dorothy, who had become both friend and informal security consultant since the incident, leaned against the window frame looking out over the Boston skyline. "Still planning to sell the building?" she asked. I nodded. "The commercial real estate broker thinks we can close by end of year. The proceeds will go into the employee fund." "Noble," Dorothy commented. "But what about you? What does Karen Mitchell want for herself after all this?" It was a question I had been avoiding. What did I want? My marketing company was being run by my capable COO while I dealt with the family fallout. My personal life was on indefinite hold. My identity had been so consumed by reacting to crisis that I barely remembered who I was before it all happened. I began, then paused, searching for the truth. I want to build something honest, something that helps rather than hurts. I just don't know what that looks like yet. Dorothy smiled. You'll figure it out. You're the woman who outsmarted a family of criminals after all. The following day brought an unexpected visitor to my Cambridge loft. When the security desk called up to announce Sylvia Mitchell had arrived, I nearly refused to see her. She had been released for the day on court approval to attend to personal matters. Curiosity won out over caution. When she stepped off the elevator, 2 guards flanking her, I barely recognized my sister. Prison had stripped away her designer clothes, perfect makeup, and carefully cultivated air of superiority. In their place was a thin, pale woman in plain civilian clothes, her once perfect hair now cut short and showing strands of premature gray. You have 1 hour, one guard informed her. Then they took positions by the elevator, giving us a semblance of privacy. Thank you for seeing me, Sylvia said, her voice smaller than I remembered. Why are you here? I asked, not inviting her to sit. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking vulnerable. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not because it changes anything or because I expect forgiveness, but because you deserve to hear it at least once from someone in this family. I studied her face, looking for the manipulation I had always associated with Sylvia. Instead, I saw only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. Why did you do it? I finally asked. Not just the attempt on my life, but all of it. The fraud, Gloria's murder. You had everything. Dad's approval, control of the company, society connections. Why risk it all? Sylvia sank onto a bench near the door without waiting for an invitation. It started small. Dad needed to move some money to cover a cash flow problem on the waterfront project. It was supposed to be temporary, just a loan from one account to another. But then there was another shortfall and another. She stared at her hands. By the time I realized how deep we were, it was too late to come clean. We would have lost everything. Dad convinced me we could fix it if we just had enough time. So you kept digging the hole deeper? Yes, she admitted. When Gloria started asking questions, Dad panicked. He said she would destroy us all. I never thought he would. I didn't know he was planning to murder her, I supplied when she faltered. Sylvia winced. He said it was an accident, that he just wanted to scare her into keeping quiet. When I found out the truth, I was already complicit. And then when Uncle Stanley changed his will, you decided I had to die too, I finished. I didn't want to, she whispered. But Dad said there was no other way, that it would be quick and painless, that one life was worth saving the family legacy. I felt a chill despite the warm apartment. And you believed him. I believed in the Mitchell name, she replied. I believed it was worth any sacrifice. I was wrong. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of her confession hanging between us. I don't expect you to forgive me, Sylvia finally said. I wouldn't in your position. I just wanted you to know that at least one of us recognizes the magnitude of what we did to you. And I'm sorry, Karen. Truly sorry. As she stood to leave, I found myself asking, what will you do when you get out? She gave a small, bitter laugh. I'll be nearly 50 with a felony record and no skills outside of running a corrupt family business. I haven't thought that far ahead. Something in her defeated posture stirred an unexpected feeling in me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first seed of compassion. Write to me, I said, surprising myself. Not now, when you've had more time to reflect, maybe in a year or two. She looked up, genuine surprise in her eyes. Why would you want that? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe because despite everything, we're still the only family each of us has left. After Sylvia left, I sat alone in my apartment watching the sun set over the Charles River. The conversation had unsettled me, bringing up emotions I thought I had successfully buried. Anger, grief, and a complicated sense of loss for the family I had never truly had. I picked up my phone and called Peggy. "Want to get dinner?" I asked when she answered. "I need to be around normal, non-criminal people tonight." "Absolutely," she replied without hesitation. "I'll call Erica and James, too. Family dinner at my place in an hour." Family. The word had such different meanings now. "Perfect," I said. "I'll bring wine." In honor of Gloria's memory, I established the Gloria Mitchell Foundation for Financial Ethics, dedicated to educating business students about ethical practices and providing whistleblower support. The foundation would be funded by the remaining portion of Uncle Stanley's inheritance once all restitution was complete. For the former Mitchell Properties employees, I created a placement service to help them find new positions, personally writing recommendations that emphasized their skills and integrity, while explaining they had no knowledge of the fraud perpetrated by upper management. As for Mitchell Properties itself, after much deliberation, I decided not to try salvaging the company name. Instead, I worked with bankruptcy trustees to sell off assets in a way that maximized value for creditors and investors. The Mitchell name in Boston business circles was finished, and perhaps that was for the best. 3 weeks before Christmas, I received an unexpected letter from Wayne. Unlike Sylvia, he made no excuses for his actions, simply expressing regret and accepting full responsibility for his choices. The letter concluded with a question: "Do you think people can ever truly change, or are we always destined to be who we were raised to be?" I thought long and hard before responding. Finally, I wrote, "Wayne, I believe we are shaped by our experiences, but not defined by them. Our family taught us that wealth and appearance were everything, that the Mitchell name justified any action. I rejected that lesson years ago when I left. You can reject it too, even now. Change isn't about becoming someone entirely new. It's about finding the better parts of yourself that were always there, just buried under expectations and fear. Those parts exist in you too." K. As the new year approached, I finally felt ready to resume my life. My marketing company had not only survived my 6-month absence, but had thrived under my COO's leadership. I would return, but with a new focus on helping ethical startups and nonprofits achieve visibility. I had purchased a small house in a quiet Cambridge neighborhood, far from the ostentatious wealth of Wellesley, but comfortable and welcoming. My chosen family, Peggy, Dorothy, and friends who had stood by me throughout the ordeal, helped me turn it into a home. One evening, as we sat around my new dining table sharing a meal, Peggy raised her glass in a toast. "To Karen, who taught us all what real strength looks like." "And to chosen family," Dorothy added. "Better than the born kind any day." As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. This was what families should be. People who stood by you, who valued you for yourself rather than what you could do for them, who helped you become your best self rather than using you for their own ends. The Mitchell legacy of wealth and prestige had been built on sand, and when challenged, it had collapsed completely. But from its ruins, I was building something far more valuable: a life of integrity, purpose, and genuine connection. I had lost the family of my birth, but in the process found myself. And that was a trade I would make again without hesitation. If you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own integrity, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for listening, and remember, blood may be thicker than water, but love is thicker than blood.